The Galactic Coalition had fought wars across 100 worlds, but none of its members had ever encountered a species quite like humanity. The aliens came from empires older than Earth's written history. Vast civilizations armed with plasma lances, energy shields, and ships that could cross star systems before a human heartbeat. When the Coalition finally admitted humanity into its ranks, they did so with condescension disguised as diplomacy. To them, humans were logistical savants, clever engineers, and reckless explorers. But soldiers? Hardly. The Coalition war academies saw no future in weapons that used chemical explosions to fling bits of metal through air. Such things were considered relics, museum pieces of a barbaric past. The frozen planet Carthos. 9 was to be the proving ground for humanity's inclusion in the Coalition's military arm. The exercise was meant to test interoperability between species, a friendly display of tactics and coordination. When the transports touched down amid the mountain peaks, the Coalition soldiers emerged like gods of war, towering in their exoframes, luminous armor gleaming under the cold sun. Hovering drones scouted ahead. Plasma carbines hummed with energy, and the air smelled faintly of ozone. Then came the humans. 3 figures trudged through the snow, wrapped in rough, tattered camouflage that looked more suited for a medieval hunt than a modern battlefield. Their rifles were long, dark, and silent. The aliens laughed. A Eularian captain, his scales catching the light, tilted his head. "Are those projectile sticks?" he asked, his voice both amused and incredulous. The tallest human, a broad-shouldered man whose face was hidden behind a mesh veil of synthetic fiber, simply nodded. "Rifles," he said. His tone was calm, patient. "They work." The Coalition's commanding officer, an Andari general whose armor pulsed with a soft violet glow, tried to be diplomatic. "You will participate with your chosen tools, of course. This exercise is about testing flexibility." The unspoken message was clear. "We'll humor your primitive traditions." The 3 humans said little. They moved with the kind of stillness that made others uneasy, their steps deliberate, their eyes constantly scanning. The leader was Captain Rains, a veteran sniper whose calm under pressure was legendary among Earth's small defense forces. At his side was Sergeant Lien Cho, the team spotter, quick-minded and sharper-tongued, her humor dry as desert wind. The third was Corporal Mason Hale, quiet, methodical, the sort of man who seemed to blend into his surroundings without effort. Together, they formed one of Earth's few long-range infiltration units, a dying art in an age of energy warfare. During the mission briefing, the Coalition officers surrounded holographic maps of Carthos, 9 luminous projections spinning above the icy floor. They discussed energy grids, drone coverage, and data uplinks in a language that sounded more like engineering than strategy. When humans were asked how they planned to contribute, Rains pointed to a topographic ridge marked by contour lines. "High ground here. We'll observe from 1,000 meters. If hostiles breach this sector, we'll neutralize." The room went quiet for a moment, then erupted in muffled laughter. "Neutralize," repeated a Valkan lieutenant, his voice dripping with irony. "With your, what did you call them? Rifles?" "Exactly," Rains replied evenly. The exercise began at dawn. Snow swept sideways through the valley, carried by relentless wind. Coalition units advanced in formation, glowing figures moving through the mist like ghosts made of light. The human snipers vanished into the terrain, their movements almost imperceptible. They crawled across ice and rock, every motion slow enough to blend with the rhythm of the storm. Within an hour, their heat signatures were gone from the Coalition scanners. Halfway through the drill, the Coalition troops encountered their first target, a series of armored drones designed to simulate enemy combatants. Plasma fire scorched the valley walls, melting snow into hissing steam. The drone's armor, designed to withstand high-energy beams, reflected most of the assault. A frustrated alien shouted, "Increase output." The beams grew brighter, hotter, but the drones remained intact. Then a sound cut through the wind, sharp, singular, unnatural in the frozen silence. A rifle shot. One of the armored drones jerked violently and collapsed, smoke trailing from a neat hole punched through its core. A second shot followed, then a third, each spaced by several seconds, each devastatingly precise. Within a minute, the entire line of drones was down. The Coalition officers stood stunned. "That's impossible," murmured an engineer, kneeling beside the wreckage. He traced the entry wound, whispering calculations under his breath. No energy residue, no plasma distortion, just kinetic force. Raines's voice came over the comms, quiet and steady. "Targets neutralized." The Illyrian captain, now uncharacteristically silent, turned toward the Andari general. "What's the effective range on those things?" "Farther than your scanners can track," came Cho's amused reply. The rest of the exercise continued in uneasy silence. Coalition soldiers, once laughing, now moved with caution whenever the humans vanished from view. Even the most arrogant among them couldn't deny what they had seen: projectile weapons breaching advanced composite armor that plasma beams barely scorched. Yet pride dies slowly among the powerful. Some muttered excuses, atmospheric anomalies, sensor interference, lucky shots. When the teams regrouped at the extraction site, the wind had softened, and the sky glowed faintly with two distant moons. The humans emerged from the snow like wraiths, their ghillie suits heavy with frost. Raines handed a data recorder to the general. "Range logs and shot data, as requested," he said. The general studied him for a moment, then took the device. "Your methods are unconventional," he admitted. Raines met his gaze through the frost. "They work when everything else fails." No one laughed this time. The humans packed their gear in silence, the only sound the soft click of metal and the whisper of wind. Behind them, the Coalition soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, each realizing that the newcomers they had mocked were something far more dangerous than expected. As the transports lifted off, carrying the teams back to orbit, the Andari general looked down at the shattered drones scattered across the ice. For the first time in decades, he felt a tremor of humility. He turned to his aide and murmured, "Perhaps there is something to learn from the primitive." Far above the planet, in the cold void of space, the human team sat wordless in their transport cabin, their faces unreadable beneath the fading frost. They didn't smile or boast. They simply waited for the next mission, the next challenge, the next chance to prove that physics, patience, and a steady hand could humble even the gods of war. The storm came without warning. One moment, the snipers and their Coalition counterparts were navigating a narrow ridge, reviewing data from the earlier exercise. The next, an unfamiliar vibration rippled through the air, sharp enough to rattle teeth. Captain Raines felt it before he heard it, an arrhythmic hum that didn't belong to wind or plasma equipment. Sergeant Cho stiffened beside him, instinctively lowering her profile against the snow-coated rock. Hale raised his rifle halfway before stopping, listening. Their restraint contrasted sharply with the Coalition soldiers farther down the slope, who looked around with confusion rather than caution. The hum stopped. A pair of drones overhead flickered, jerked, then spiraled downwards like drunk fireflies before smashing into the ice. The aliens gasped. Raines didn't. He recognized a directed EMP pulse when he saw one, though this one had a sharpness to it, tuned, deliberate, malicious. "What just happened?" shouted a Vulcan officer, tapping uselessly at his dead wrist display. Raines scanned the horizon. Movement glimmered in the distance, barely visible in the swirling snow. Silhouettes too coordinated to be wildlife, too brazen to be Coalition. "We're not alone," he murmured. Hale lowered his visor and nodded once, already calculating sight lines. Cho whispered they jammed the comms too. "Whoever they are, they came prepared." The first plasma bolt screamed across the valley, striking a boulder near the Coalition column and sending a spray of molten shards across their flank. The aliens scattered, their disabled shields leaving them suddenly fragile. More blasts followed, erratic and brutal, fired by hands unfamiliar with the weapon's recoil. These attackers weren't professional soldiers. They were something worse, opportunists who didn't care about precision, only damage. Rains watched the patterns of the bolts, the angles of origin, the speed of retreat and advance. Mercenary raiders, he said, using stolen coalition tech. The irony was bitter. The coalition, so proud of its superior weaponry, now had those same weapons turned against it, and without functioning shields or exo support, they were effectively blind. Cho crouched beside a panicked Andari lieutenant, fumbling with his unpowered gauntlet. "Stop trying to reboot it," she said sharply. "Energy systems are fried. You need to move." The lieutenant stared at her, bewildered. "How do you fight without tools?" she interrupted. "By thinking." Rains tapped their shoulders. "Time to move." The trio dropped into the snow, disappearing into the ridgeline with practiced ease. While the coalition soldiers scrambled for cover, the humans slid into a world that felt familiar, the world where chaos favored the patient. The mercenaries advanced, emboldened by the coalition's fractured formation. Rain spotted a heavy rail cannon crew setting up behind a collapsed ice shelf. If they fired, the coalition's center line would disintegrate. Hale steadied his breathing and adjusted his rifle. Cho confirmed wind drift and temperature. One shot cracked through the frozen air. The cannon operator jerked and fell. The weapon toppled, smashing into the snow. Coalition eyes widened. Even without functional scanners, they understood what had happened. The snipers were awake. "Where are they?" whispered a Yularian trooper, searching the ridge with his naked eyes. The answer came as another shot, then a third, each clean and purposeful. Mercenaries retreated behind cover, suddenly cautious. The coalition troops clung to the safety provided by the invisible humans somewhere above them. Rains crawled forward, snow crusting on his ghillie suit. Cho tracked a pair of mercenaries attempting to flank the valley. Hale monitored the rear, guarding against a counter-sniper. Their teamwork was silent choreography, built from years of trust and necessity. "This is turning into a real fight," Cho said softly. "Then we treat it like one," Rains replied. A mercenary drone lifted clumsily into the air, struggling to maintain altitude after the EMP. Hale exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger, and sent it crashing back down. The coalition soldiers below erupted into raucous cheers, a sound tinged with or rather than arrogance. A young Valkan private stared up at the ridge. "Humans," he breathed, as though saying the word for the first time. "They're ghosts." Rains caught glimpses of the mercenaries regrouping near a mountain pass. Their leader, a broad figure wearing mismatched armor plates, was signaling retreat. But retreat didn't mean surrender. They were heading toward higher elevation, where the terrain would favor ambushes and energy weapons would be safer to use without ricochets. "We can't let them get up there," Cho warned. "They know this tech better than they look." "Coalition can't pursue," Hale added. "Not without shields." Rain studied the rocky path winding upward like a frozen scar. They needed to cut off the mercenaries before they reached the high ledge. "We go," he said. Cho looked at him. "Just us. Just us." The decision wasn't reckless. It was necessary. The coalition relied on technology to define their role in battle. Humanity relied on something more primal, adaptability. Where machines failed, instinct endured. They moved quickly but silently, weaving through crevices and icy outcroppings. The wind thickened, muffling distant footfalls. The mercenaries grew clearer. 6, maybe 7, pushing toward the high pass. One stumbled. Another argued. Their formation was sloppy, their desperation palpable. A shot rang out, then another. The mercenaries realized too late that they had walked into the crosshairs of predators who didn't need glowing armor to dominate a battlefield. Within minutes, the pass was cleared. The last mercenary threw down his weapon and ran, slipping on the ice before disappearing between boulders. Rains didn't fire. He had no need. Fear would travel faster than any bullet. The wind settled. The valley fell quiet again. Rain surveyed the battlefield, the coalition forces gathering strength below. "We hold here," he said. "They'll expect us to chase." Cho nodded. Hale checked his rifle one more time. The mercenaries had underestimated them. The coalition had doubted them. But on this frozen world, stripped of technology and pretense, humanity had shown what it truly was, a species that survived by refusing to surrender. And this was only the beginning. The mercenaries did not stay defeated for long. From their perch on the ridge, Rains and his team watched the survivors regroup farther down the ravine, gathering around a hulking bipedal walker that stomped through the snow with an uneven, grinding gait. The machine was crude compared to Coalition standards, its plating scavenged from different models, its joints patched with exposed wiring. It carried power, raw, dangerous power. The mercenaries clustered behind it like vultures behind a wounded beast, desperate enough to let a half-functional war machine lead their next assault. Choke adjusted her scope, studying the walker's movements. "If that thing gets into the valley," she said, "the Coalition won't have anything left to hide behind." Hale grunted in agreement. He rarely wasted words when the terrain already spoke volumes. The ravine, narrow and steep, funneled sound upward. Every mechanical creak echoed like thunder, masking the layered shuffle of mercenary boots. Rains steadied his breathing, letting the cold sharpen his focus. The Coalition forces below were reorganizing, but they remained exposed. If the walker reached them, the mercenaries would punch straight through their weakened lines. He weighed his options with discipline honed from years of quiet warfare. Range, angles, wind, visibility, enemy morale. None favored the Coalition. That left only one conclusion. "We end it here," he said. Cho cracked a small smile. "Thought you'd say that." The walker angled toward a natural ramp carved by ancient ice flows. Snow crumbled under its heavy steps. The mercenaries marched behind it, emboldened by the sudden advantage. Their leader, a scarred brute wrapped in mismatched armor and arrogance, barked orders while cradling a plasma cannon in his arms. Rains sighted him, then shifted his aim. Not yet. The leader was irrelevant until the machine died. The machine, however, was a threat even patience couldn't tolerate. Heat exhaust poured on the right. Cho murmured, tracking the flicker of orange through a lens. "If we breach it, feedback might fry the core." "Risky," Hale muttered. "Better than letting it crush the Coalition line." They repositioned silently, crawling along the ridge until they found a narrow alcove sheltered from the wind. Snow flurried around them like drifting ash, but the cold did nothing to dull their steadiness. Rains settled his rifle against a natural stone rest, exhaled, and centered the reticle over the walker's weak point. The machine paused, shifting its bulk to clear a boulder. It was enough. His shot lashed through the frozen air, disappearing into the machine's flank. A metallic scream tore through the ravine as sparks erupted from the exhaust, and the walker lurched violently. Its left leg buckled, driving it sideways into the rock wall with earth-shaking force. The mercenaries shouted in frantic confusion. Cho fired next, her round shattering the joint of the walker's stabilizer. Hale's bullet followed, ricocheting into an exposed conduit that burst into a shower of molten fragments. The walker collapsed fully, its corrupted systems whining in protest before dying with a final mechanical groan. A stunned hush swept through the valley. Even the wind seemed surprised. The mercenary leader's roar broke it. He lifted his plasma cannon and fired blindly toward the ridge. The blast seared the cliffside several meters away, vaporizing snow into steam. Another shot followed, then a third, each increasingly desperate. "Reckless," Hale muttered. "Predictable," Cho corrected. Rains observed the furious figure, noting the overcharged glow of the cannon's core. The leader was pushing it toward meltdown without understanding its limitations. Rains waited for the inevitable lapse. Rage always created openings. When the leader stepped out from behind cover to get a clearer angle, Rains fired. The round struck the cannon's emitter, cracking it like fragile glass. A surge of unstable energy burst outward, sending the leader crashing to the ground as the cannon sputtered, sparked, and tumbled from his hands. He tried to rise, but Hale's next shot shattered the armor plate on his knee, dropping him back into the snow. The battle was over. The remaining mercenaries scattered in every direction, abandoning weapons, gear, and any illusion of courage. Some fled into the lower ravines, others up the far slopes, but none dared remain within range of the unseen sharpshooters. The coalition soldiers, watching from the valley floor, finally understood what had happened. The snipers stood, their ghillie suits blending with the frost until they seemed to materialize from the landscape itself. Rains tapped his comm again, though he didn't expect a response. Surprisingly, a faint crackle answered. The EMP field was fading. The Andari general's voice emerged, distorted but clear enough. "Team, human team, report." Rain spoke evenly. "Threat neutralized. Valley is secure." Silence followed, heavy with something deeper than simple acknowledgement. Respect, long overdue, finally crossed the divide. When the general replied, his tone held no trace of earlier condescension. "Your actions saved us. We owe you more than thanks." Cho glanced at Rains, eyebrows raised. "Historic moment," she whispered. Rains didn't comment. History wasn't their concern. Survival was. But it was impossible to ignore the way coalition soldiers now looked up at them as they descended the ridge, no longer with amusement or doubt, but with admiration shaped by necessity. The general approached them personally, his armor scarred from earlier blasts. "We misjudged you," he said. "Your methods, your discipline, they reveal strengths our doctrines overlooked." Hale shrugged faintly. "Different tools. Same goal. Different mindset." The general corrected gently. "One we must learn from." Rains met his gaze. "Then start by recognizing that every battlefield has rules. You just forgot that physics writes most of them." The general nodded, accepting the truth with humility rare among his kind. The coalition troops began salvaging equipment, assisted by Cho's quick assessments and Hale's practical efficiency. Cooperation, not hierarchy, shaped their movements. As the sky darkened and the wind shifted, Rains looked toward the mountains where the mercenaries had fled. They would return. Desperation always did. But next time, the coalition would be ready, and not because of new technology, but because they had learned to trust those who mastered simplicity over spectacle. For now, the valley was quiet, the crisis ended. But the story of what happened on Carthos 9 was only beginning to ripple outward, destined to reshape the coalition's understanding of war, of humanity, and of the value hidden beneath humble weapons wielded by patient hands.